We have to confess that we are unworthy to be children of God, but we recognize him for who he is. And when we do that, even if we're still in the pig pen, he runs to meet us right where we are. Like, you don't have to get good and clean up your life and then God will save you. Things of this world won't fill the spiritual void in your life. Things of this world won't fill the spiritual void in your life. So often we look to things of this world to fill this hole in our hearts, whether it's money or sex or drugs or work or school, alcohol, other things, whatever it could be, even good things that are in the wrong place. We look to these things to find fulfillment and joy, and then we find ourselves feeling empty like the younger son in the story. He got the money, he got the inheritance, he went to get whatever he wanted, and it wasn't enough. So what happens next with him? Verse 17 says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food, and here I am dying of hunger? I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers. The younger son here at this point in his life, he's at absolute rock bottom, but he's not going to stay that way for long. The text says he came to his senses. So 13 months ago, I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so it's been a thing for me that's been good mentally, from just to be able to go out there and do that with that workout and that exercise. It's been good physically for me. I go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu here in Fayetteville, just down the road, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's grappling. It's kind of like wrestling, but it's martial arts. And the idea is one-on-one grappling, and you try and get your opponent to submit. So if you've never seen it, think like UFC, which maybe more of you have seen. Everything they do on the ground, except for we wear way more clothes. Okay, we have the traditional uniform, the gi, on. And I've been doing that for over a year now. And you try and get your opponent to submit, whether it's with an arm bar or a shoulder lock or a choke, and whatever you can within the rules of the game, you try and get your opponent to submit. So we go to class, we do a warm-up, and then we'll drill a technique for 30, 40 minutes, and then whatever time left we have in our class, we spar, but in jiu-jitsu it's called rolling. And one of my favorite guys to roll with is a guy named John. He's somewhat close to my size. He's genuinely a nice dude. He works hard. He's good at jiu-jitsu, and he's 63. And I should have took a picture with him on Tuesday, but I didn't. I honestly didn't know he was going to be in the sermon on Tuesday, but here he is. And you may think, Jacob likes to roll with John because he can whoop that 63-year-old. And here's the thing. There's a rule in jiu-jitsu. It's called don't tap and tell. So if I get someone to tap out, I'm not supposed to tell everybody. Here's what I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you that I got John to tap out. What I'm going to tell you is that for every one time, which is actually the amount of times I've ever got John to tap out, he's got me probably 50 or 60 times. Like he's way better than me at jiu-jitsu. I lose to him a lot, but I don't like losing. And so Tuesday, I went into it. I trained with John. I'm going to roll with John. And I told myself, I'm not tapping. I will let him put me to sleep before, I'll wake up, they'll have lifted my legs in the air, I'll be fine. But I ain't tapping. But here's what happened. I just assumed, he's got me all sorts of ways, but I assumed he would somehow get me in a chokehold and I would wake up a few seconds later. When he hit me with the arm bar, though, I'm flat on my back. He's extended my arm. My elbow's coming up. When the pain and thought of my elbow is about to snap hit my brain, I came to my senses. I did. And if you've been at rock bottom before, whether it's in the jiu-jitsu gym or after some sort of failure in your life, you know that it has a way of making you come to your senses, hopefully. The younger son in this story, he comes to his senses, he decides to return to his father, and then he rehearses this speech to his dad. He says he's going to confess that he sinned, he's going to explain that he's not worthy to be called a son, and then he's going to hire himself out as a slave to his own father. And keep those things in mind as we read in verse 20. It says, so he got up and went to his father. But while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father told his servants, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. It's this, like, another shocking twist in the story. Like, if the dad didn't smack the son when he asked for his inheritance early, we would have expected him to see him, make him crawl up and beg his way back into our family, and probably smack him again. But that's not what happens here. The listeners of the story would have been shocked to see that the father runs to the son, which would have been disrespectful for a man of his status to run. But that's what he does. He embraces his son, even though he had treated him the way that he did. So why did the father respond that way? It's as if the father wanted to take the shame and embarrassment on himself so that his child didn't have to. And remember the rehearsed speech. The son told the father that he sinned. The son told the father that he wasn't worthy to be called a son, but he didn't hire himself off to his dad because his dad interrupted him before he got that far. On top of the father rejecting these cultural norms, he runs a long way off to embrace his son because he was his son. He didn't force him to earn back his sonship, and he took on the shame so that his son may have new life. And I'm hoping that this starts to sound familiar to you. Because here's your second point. God will take your shame too. God will take your shame. In fact, he doesn't actually pour any shame on you. That's the enemy that does that. God will take your shame. That's why God became flesh, and he bore all the shame on a cross that we deserved. Isaiah 53, verses 3 through 5 says, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people turned away from. He was despised, and we didn't value him. Yet he himself bore our sicknesses, and he carried our pains, but we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced because of our rebellion, crushed because of our iniquities. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds." Romans 5:8, "But God proves his own love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." And Romans 10:9, "If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." You see, what we have to do, what everyone has to do if they're going to be a follower of Jesus, is you have to have this moment where you come to your senses and return to the Father. We have to confess that we are unworthy to be children of God, but we recognize him for who he is. And when we do that, even if we're still in the pig pen, he runs to meet us right where we are. Like, you don't have to get good and clean up your life and then God will save you. He'll meet you right where you are and save you right then and there. He'll save you right here in this chair if it's something you need to do.